10 O'Clock Scholar, where I first saw Bob, but it was a beatnik joint. You know, and we went because it was kind of hip and you could get near beer. You know, it kind of tasted like beer, but it wasn't. And it was a room in Dinkytown, all painted black and full of smoke. And you know, we went to see the beatniks, and they'd be saying poetry and snapping their fingers and saying poetry. And then every once in a while, somebody would get up and play some music. And that's where I first saw Bob. I remember him, but I don't remember what he was playing, but I remember his old hat that he had kind of on his first album maybe, and just kind of scruffy, and he was just banging away, and he was playing old folk songs. You know, I don't think he was playing anything original, and there were other people playing too, Spider John Kerner, and boy, I can't remember, it was so long ago, but it was a wonderful experience. I remember that, but I thought, wow, who's this guy, you know? But he had, you know, he was still Bob Zimmerman at the time, you know. It later clicked on me, hey, this is the same guy. I mean, I bought his first album. That was my first experience with him, because I'd heard something on the radio. And I can just remember my folks had an old console, a big old console radio record player in our living room. And I remember laying on the floor, you know, I'm 15, 16 years old. I'm laying on the floor with my ear to the speaker, listening to this first album of Bob's. It was so unlike anything I'd ever heard before. And I remember thinking, this is the brother I never had, you know, this is the guy, you know. And from then on, it was just, you know, you couldn't help but listen to everything he does. You know, it's just marvelous. I was in college at the time at the U, and that was sort of an epic journey for me. It took me about 10 years to graduate, but it was a wonderful 10 years. Anyway, we lived at a place over near the University of Minnesota. It was a big old flop house that we converted into little apartments for a bunch of friends. And we had a lot of parties there. And one night I met Larry there. He was in a wheelchair at that time, of course. And we just hit it off and started sitting down singing. We played some songs together and you know, enjoyed meeting him. And the next morning, I got a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning. And he says, Geno, this is Larry. And I said, yeah. He says, you want to go to Mexico? And I was on spring break or something. And I said, well, yeah, I'd like to go to Mexico. He said, when are you going? He says, in about an hour. So that was it. I jumped in his car, and he had a driver, of course, and we drove all the way to Guadalajara, Mexico, and we're friends ever since. You know, so we started playing, singing songs, and going out to places to mostly you know, little coffee houses and things like that, and then people would join us. So it wasn't just he and I; it'd be several people over the years. You know, be people. We called ourselves the mere mortals, because Bob, of course, was immortal at that point in my life. Anyway, we actually, I remember taking him out to Ambergris Key. We flew out there, a bunch of us in a small plane. I think there were 14 of us. We chartered a plane to fly out to Ambergris because we wanted to get in this beautiful water on the Barrier Reef. And we brought Larry down to the beach and struggled to get him through the sand in his wheelchair, got him to the edge of the water. And we put a inner tube around his shoulders, under his shoulders, and we took him out of the water, and we put a mask on and a snorkel. And we excuse me one second. And we tipped him up into the water so that he could see like he was snorkeling, and we led him around like that, and he would kind of say something, because he couldn't talk, of course, and we tip him up, and he'd get his breath and clear his mask. And then, so we actually snorkeled him around this Barrier Reef for about a half an hour in Belize on Ambergris Key. And, you know, this is a typical, incredibly inspiring moment that we had together, you know. That was Dick and me too, Dick Cohen and myself. I was living out in Cokato at the time. He says, Geno, he says, get ready, we're going on the road, we're going out east. And I said, what's going on? He says, there's a circus going on. Bob's got this show going on. It's called Rolling Thunder. And he said, I want you to go with me, and we're going to have a wonderful time. And I said, yeah, hell, I'm going. You know, he picked me up, and we drove all the way to Worcester, Massachusetts, in his handicapped van. I think we drove straight through, of course. And it was about 8, 9 o'clock at night, and we walked into this theater in Worcester, Massachusetts, and there was Bob on stage with everybody in his makeup, singing like a shaman. I mean, it was just blew me away, and it was so lucky. And it was a credible concert. And then the next day, we stayed right with everybody there, and met him the next morning, and met so many people, Scarlett and Ramblin' Jack Elliott, and Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell. All these people were there, and it was like being in a dream. And nobody knew who we were, but we were, Larry and myself were there as Bob's guests. So they treated us like, of course, they treated Larry like a king. He was in a wheelchair. Everybody just went out of their way to be extra nice to him, and I happened to be standing next to him most of the time. So I was really lucky, and that's the way it was always, because they knew that this was Bob's friend. Larry was Bob's friend, and we got the royal treatment the whole time, every time we went out. And Bob was always so busy doing things, and anytime he was out in public, where everybody was, people were always trying to get to him. So but he was always friendly to us, and always wanted to stop and chat and talk to Larry and ask him what's going on. And he'd always give him, every time after over 15 years, whenever we ran into him, he'd give me a little hug and say, how you doing? And he knew we weren't trying to get anything, and that really made a big difference. The routine was, we knew what Bob's last song was every night. And we knew that his routine was to throw a towel over his head and run to the bus as fast as possible and get the hell out of there and go to the next town, And we knew what the last song was, so we would go get in Larry's van and get behind the bus and follow them to the next gig. And Larry and Bob would talk on the CB radio back and forth, because Larry couldn't get Larry's wheelchair in Bob's bus. So, and Larry needed all this stuff, of course. So they would talk and chat, and then pretty soon everybody fall asleep, and then you drive for 4 or 5 hours and end up at some obscure motel, and then nothing ever happened till about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when people were getting up, getting ready, just walking around outside in the parking lot, and hoping that a horde of people haven't found us, and then they go and do the sound check and do it again. I had seen the bridge benefit in it was in Oakland the year before, and there weren't any wheelchairs on stage. I knew it was a benefit for disabled children, and I went back to the cities and talked to Larry. I said, "Man, we should play that. We should figure out. Let's send them a couple of our songs. Total, who knows if they'll even look at it, but let's send them a couple of our songs and see what they think." So we sent them a tape, and I'm sure that Bob said that, you should book these guys. I'm sure Bob had something to do with it, probably Mark Perkansky, who knows. But anyway, we got a notice back that said there'll be 3 airplane tickets for you, and we want you to come out and open the show for the bridge concert. 30,000 people at Shoreline Amphitheater outside, wonderful. And it was a evening of songwriters, and so a lot of it was stripped down to just bare instruments, not big band things. And they met us at the airport with a limousine and took care of us all the way through. And we opened the show 2 years in a row, which I thought was nice. It wasn't just a one-time wheelchair thing, and there were kids on stage in wheelchairs both times, which was really, we kind of pushed them to do that. And I think, Cheech Marin was the master of ceremonies. I remember him introducing us, and we had it was the Halloween snowstorm in Minneapolis. We had just spent 4 hours on the runway waiting to get out and praying that we could get out, and somehow we flew in. And I remember Cheech Marin saying, "Just in from a blizzard in Minnesota," Larry Kegan, Gene LaFond. And And the people were just wonderful. They right from the beginning, they got into the music. They weren't, they were really surprised, and it was a very powerful moment. Of course, seeing Larry perform was always a powerful thing. So Larry used to live in his house in St. Paul, actually on LaFond Avenue, which is ironic as heck. And Bob came over just before he played 5 nights at the Orpheum. And somehow he said, why don't you guys open? At that time, he was using opening acts. And he said, why don't you guys open for me? And we said, well, you already got, what's the name of the band that was supposed to open for him? Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, they said, well, we'll cut those guys short and you guys can come out and play, 2 or 3 or 4 songs, So, we were so excited, of course. And so we rehearsed. He says, I'll send Tony over to the house to play bass for you guys, Tony Garnier. And so he came over and rehearsed the songs that we were going to do. And we went to the venue. I remember the backstage at the Orpheum. And I walked in the back door. Bob had given us his dressing room because he knew Larry needed a place. So Bob gave us his dressing room, and I walk in the door carrying my Martin, my guitar, and the guitar tech grabbed it out of my hands. And he said, I'll take care of this for you. And he put it up on his rack, and he cut the strings off and put new strings on it, tuned it all up, and set it next to Bob's guitar on the rack, I thought, am I dreaming all this? What's going on? So we always had laminate passes. We could go everywhere we want, anytime we want. Over the years, the seas would part for us because we had these passes. It was like magic. And one thing Bob remembered it, or told me, he said, look out for those front row people. He said, they're all crazy. Stay away from those front row people. And of course, we've gotten to know many of them, including you and the Perkanskis and Glenn and Madge and all those people. And, the front row people are most fun people we ever hung out with. So anyway, it was New Year's Eve, and Bob says, let's have a little party. How about it? You go get Spider John Kerner and Tony Glover and bring them out, and we'll have a New Year's party, So he hadn't seen those guys since probably, when he left to go to New York, or when he changed his name anyway. And I mean, so we went and found Kerner and Glover, and packed him into the van and drove out. He's got this beautiful farm out west of the cities. And so we had just a wonderful, wonderful evening. He sat around in a circle with Bob and Larry and Tony and John Kerner, and just told stories and talked. And about midnight, everything was exciting, and we were into drinking a little bit of something or other. And I got the courage to go pick up my guitar and pull up a chair in this circle, and we started singing. Larry and I started singing, and Spider John sang too, and I think Tony played a little harp, and Bob went and picked up this ancient, beautiful Martin guitar and accompanied us as we sang. He knew a little bit of the songs, And he didn't play any of his songs. He would never do that. He'd never play any of his songs, although he did one time. I just remembered. And it was just a special evening. I mean, my feet didn't touch the ground for 2 weeks. I was so excited. It was a wonderful evening, and he was just open and friendly, and we had a wonderful time. I just, what can you say? That he's the best songwriter of the century, and I got to sing his songs. I got to meet him. I got to meet all these wonderful people. Got to travel a bit, and I'm just blessed. I'm so lucky. And now, I can sing with Amy, and we can sing just about anything. I think we've got 385 songs on our list of things we can get through and sing together. So I'm really pleased. I'm really blessed. There's no other word but pure gratitude. And it's because of Larry's friendship with Bob. In fact, Dick Cohn tells a nice story when he talks about that. He says, I always carry a picture in my wallet of 2 guys. He says, the one in the picture is the most incredible person I've ever met in my life. And the guy standing next to him is Bob Dylan. I thought that was really nice tribute to Larry, you know, because none of it would have happened without him, you know. And we're just blessed. I just feel blessed. All of us that got to travel with him. It wasn't just me. There were several people that I couldn't go, so somebody else would go. And, you know, it was just, what can you say? Total blessing.